This show definitely has some redeeming qualities, but like a lot of these Marvel Disney Plus originals, it is super frustrating because this show could have been way better. Like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you're new, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into Miss Marvel. I enjoy this show for the most part. I really like this character. I like Iman Vellani in this role. I think she's very charismatic. You can tell, I know personally she loves the MCU. She's very knowledgeable about it, and she definitely brings that into this role. I think the overall base narrative thread is compelling and interesting, but the frustrating thing about this show, like with a lot of these Marvel Disney Plus originals, is that one, it's too short. If I remember correctly, this show was only 6 episodes, so it's hard to flesh out an entire story in 6 episodes. Marvel did this thing with Netflix where they would stretch these Netflix shows like Daredevil, Iron Fist, etc. out into 13 episodes, which was unnecessary. There was a lot of filler in those shows, as much as I love Daredevil. But instead of backing it up to like a 10 or a 9 episode season, they just went like to 6 or to 8, which I feel like is too short. I think 10 is the sweet spot. So I think the 6 episode run for this show ultimately hurts it in the end, because we don't have enough time to flesh out the story, to flesh out the characters, and goddamn, is there just no fleshing out of the villains in this series, like at all. But here, let's just go over the good first, because this show, especially in the back end, gets very frustrating. The good, Iman Vellani. This is her first big role, I think. She's fantastic. She's very likable. She's charismatic. She portrays this kind of angsty teenager role very well. The family dynamic presented in this show is great. I like touching on their Muslim culture, especially within the household. You know, her parents are pretty strict with her, as she is a young woman growing up in, Jersey. They don't want her going out doing all these things she wants to do, like going to AvengerCon, dressing up in outfits and things like that, which is understandable. And she rebels against them, as any teenager would. And I think that dynamic of this show is done and written very, very well. I think her dynamic with her friends is great. I think her crush on Cameron is written very well. I think their chemistry is very good. I think the base narrative with her trying to figure out where this bangle came from, how it relates to her family, and how her family history relates to her powers. I think that is all very compelling. I like when they travel to Pakistan. We get to kind of see the ins and outs of that city, that culture. That's all great. I think the set designs and just like the vibrant colors used, all the visual stuff in this show, outside of some of her powers, some of the scenes with her powers get a little wonky in the CGI department, but everything else I think is great. Now, where this show falls apart for me is it kind of gets stuck running in place. And it does this weird thing that a lot of these MCU shows have done, where they introduce this plot, but then towards the middle of the plot, they don't really know where to go with it, and they just get kind of stuck. And I think the best example of this is when they are in Pakistan. And this happened in Falcon and the Winter Soldier too. They come into conflict. Her and the Red Dagger come into conflict with the clandestines, the title villains of this show, and they just kind of feel like they're chasing each other between like 2 blocks. And like this happens in Falcon and the Winter Soldier too, where it's like the mid-season building fight with the Flag Smashers. It's like they fight and then they go back to their respective like hotels or houses, which seem to only be a couple blocks from each other, and then they come back and fight again, and it's just like, what is going on here? This is just a really weird setup for this whole conflict right now. And they do the same thing in Pakistan in this. She comes into conflict with people that kind of back off, and they come in conflict again like 2 blocks from each other. It's very weird. I don't know what this story structure is, but I don't like it. And there are moments in this show where it's like the clandestines are a threat, but then we just go back to regular life and they're not a threat, and then we come back. I don't like that. It's very disjointed, disorienting, and you never really quite feel the threat of these villains. I think they have an interesting backstory. They are from essentially another realm that exists on top of the Earth realm. They're jinns, so from, you know, Muslim lore, they are jinns, or genies for Americans. They are these beings from another dimension that have powers. And I think all that is interesting, but none of them have any personality except for Cameron's mom, who really doesn't get that much characterization outside of like the one sit down talk she has with Kamala explaining that her great grandmother was a part of their clan. And that's about it. We never really understand how these people traversing back to their realm will disrupt our world. I guess it causes an incursion, which is highlighted in later shows and movies in this series, but at this time we don't really know. They never really explain how this is going to disrupt and possibly destroy our world. We never understand why they got separated from their world to begin with, why they're here, etc. They never dive very deep into these villains, and they just come off as very bland. And then all the clandestines are killed off, and then Cameron's the main villain in the finale. I guess it's just, like I said, it gets stuck running in place at the halfway point, and then, like a lot of these Marvel shows, they rush it to the finale. And they're just like, okay, this is what we set up. We didn't really give you much in the middle, but here's the ending, so cheer, and this is great. And the finale is fun, but it just all feels unearned, because you never really understand what the motive of these villains are. You never really understand where they come from. They don't really have an origin. They're all just kind of like cutouts with no personalities except for Cameron, and then he's flipped to the villain in the end, and it's just like, okay, we need a big fight scene. And their fight scene is fun, but again, it's just, it doesn't feel earned. And that's honestly the biggest problem with this show, is the villains and how they connect to the storyline. But I think her discovering that she led her grandmother to the train, and kind of her great grandmother's backstory, that's all interesting and fascinating. Discovering that these Bangles are connected to the Jinn somehow, and maybe another galactic power somewhere else, is compelling. That's all great. But when you don't really know where to go with the villains and the conflict, the show falls apart because of that. The other thing I will say, even though I love Iman Vellani in this role, and I think she's great, in some of the big action set pieces, you can tell that this is like her first big role in television and movies, because her acting is pretty shaky. Like her conflict with Cameron in the last episode, they're kind of in this like crystal shell that she created, and she's yelling to him to like stop doing this, he's gonna hurt people, and it's not great. It's a little melodramatic, and kind of, she doesn't really know what to do with her body in these action sequences. And the same goes to when she confronts his mom in Pakistan. It's the same thing. When she opens up the portal to their world, she's just standing like a pencil screaming at her, and it comes off very awkward. I will say her acting in these types of big sequences does get better in the Marvels, for sure. But it just kind of hinders this show a little bit, because you can tell she's new at all of this. But outside of the bad plotting and pacing throughout, and the very, very bland villains, I love the rest of this show. It's funny. I think, again, her dynamic with her family is very personal and very relatable. And the visuals, incredible. I love how they incorporate the animation into like her internal thoughts and everything like that. I think that's all creative and good. The suit looks great. I love the suit. I just wish the writers, producers, and etc. would have taken more time to flesh out the villains and the plot, because this show would have been better for it.